Cecilia was tracing the rim of a water glass with a cloth, trying to make the crystal shine so bright it hurt her eyes. She was what you might call a quiet girl. If you saw her, you wouldn't think she was anything special, just a young woman, maybe 21, with deep, soulful brown eyes that usually held a kind of sad stillness. Her skin was a beautiful, smooth caramel tone, and she kept her dark, natural hair pulled back tightly, like she was trying to hide the fact that it was long and thick. She dressed simply for work, in a plain black blouse and trousers, practical shoes, and no jewelry at all. She was an American student studying literature, but right now, in the dimly lit, upscale bar in Florence, Italy, she was just trying to earn enough money to make it through the next semester. It was a cold Tuesday night. The kind of night where the wind whipped around the Renaissance stone buildings outside, making the thick glass of the bar windows hum. Cecilia was mentally preparing for a long, boring evening when the door opened, and the air in the room suddenly changed. It wasn't just the cold gust that came in, it was the two men who entered. The one in the lead was the kind of man that every woman in the room stopped breathing for, even if they didn't know why. His name was Leonardo Valtieri, but Cecilia didn't know that yet. He was maybe in his late 20s, impossibly handsome in a way that felt dangerous, with sharp, dark features and heavy eyebrows that sat above intense, slate-gray eyes. He wore a tailored, dark wool overcoat that looked like it cost more than Cecilia made in a year. There was an expensive, custom quality to every single thing he had on, and he moved like he owned the ground he walked on, or maybe the whole city. The man right behind him was just as big, but rougher. This was Vito. He was older, maybe 40, with a scar running over his jawline and a suit that looked like it was tailored to hold a weapon. He had a tight, watchful look on his face, like a guard dog on a chain. Cecilia had worked here for 6 months, and she knew the difference between a rich tourist and power. This was power. Raw, heavy, and silent. Leonardo ignored the main bar area and walked straight for a secluded, dark booth in the corner. Vito quickly swept his eyes over the few wealthy customers before settling down in the seat facing the door, creating a human shield for his boss. Cecilia's manager, an anxious man named Marco, pushed her forward. "Go. They look like they want top-shelf liquor. And be quick." Her hands felt a little shaky as she approached their booth. She kept her eyes low, looking at the dark marble tabletop. "Good evening," she said in her lightly accented Italian, keeping her voice even and professional. "What can I get for you tonight?" Vito looked her over with a quick, dismissive glare. But Leonardo didn't look dismissive. He looked at her. Not at her face, but at her. He studied her simple, unadorned appearance, the way she kept her shoulders slightly hunched, the quiet sadness in her eyes. It was a long, silent moment that made the haze on Cecilia's arms stand up. "Just a glass of the house red for me," Leonardo said finally. His voice was deep, like a low rumble, and surprisingly gentle. Vito looked stunned. "Boss? The house red? Don't you want the—" Leonardo cut him off with a single, sharp look. "Just the house red, Vito." He turned his attention back to Cecilia. "And bring another glass. You will sit down." Cecilia's breath caught. I'm sorry, sir, I can't. I'm working. I have other tables." Leonardo didn't argue. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a stack of crisp, €100 notes on the table, easily 10 times what she'd make all night. "You have no other tables now," he said simply. He tapped the space next to him on the dark leather seat. "Sit. Drink. You don't have to speak. Just sit." Cecilia felt a flush rise on her neck. It wasn't a request, it was an order. She looked quickly toward Marco, who was already shaking his head nervously and waving her back toward the powerful man. Marco knew better than to refuse a customer like this. She walked back to the bar, poured 2 glasses of the cheapest, most standard Chianti, and slowly returned. She placed his glass in front of him, then hesitantly sat down next to him, feeling the warmth of his presence right beside her. Vito looked furious. He kept switching his gaze between Cecilia and Leonardo, his hands clenching tight under the table. It was clear he wanted her gone, but he couldn't disobey his boss. Cecilia kept her eyes fixed on her glass. "What is happening?" she thought. She was not beautiful enough for a powerful man to try to impress her. She was not a confident person who could hold an interesting conversation. She was just a girl who needed a paycheck. "You're American," Leonardo said, finally breaking the silence after a long minute. Yes, she whispered. Why Florence? Literature. The culture. I needed the scholarship to make it work. He nodded slowly. He didn't seem interested in her answers. He just seemed interested in watching her breathe. You have sad eyes, he murmured, taking a slow sip of the wine. Like rain on glass. Cecilia finally looked up, unable to hide her confusion. I don't understand, sir. Why did you ask me to sit? I should be working. Leonardo sighed, a small, tired sound that made him seem momentarily human. He leaned back into the shadows of the booth, and his intense eyes softened, losing their sharp, hard edge. You remind me of someone, he said. Someone who was very important. This was not a flirtation. This was something deep, and sad, and complicated. Cecilia suddenly felt a wave of sympathy for the dangerous man beside her. He wasn't here for the wine or the conversation. He was running from something painful. Before she could ask who he meant, a loud, horrible noise tore through the cold night outside. Crash. It sounded like a massive piece of machinery had collided with stone. It was followed by immediate, panicked yelling. Vito was on his feet instantly, his hand moving automatically inside his coat. Leonardo didn't panic, but his eyes went instantly cold and sharp again. He looked toward the door, not with fear, but with sudden, deep recognition. They found me, he whispered, though the words were meant for Vito. Vito stepped away from the table, scanning the bar customers. Boss, let's go. It's too exposed here. But Leonardo was already moving. He grabbed Cecilia's wrist, his touch strong and non-negotiable. Stay low, he ordered, pulling her down toward the seat cushion next to him. Just then, the glass of the front window exploded inward with a deafening, showering noise, followed by the sight of two men, masked and armed with heavy clubs, running into the bar, clearly looking for a fight, or worse. Cecilia, Leonardo commanded, his voice now steel, get behind me. Now. He didn't know her name, but he had just said it. He was focused only on protecting her, a complete stranger. It was a terrifying, confusing moment, and Cecilia suddenly realized that her quiet, simple life had just crashed headfirst into a storm she had no way to escape. If you are enjoying the start of this intense story, please show your support. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter when the conflict escalates. The sound of the exploding glass was deafening, but all Leonardo could feel was the small, fragile bone of Cecilia's wrist under his grip. His face, which had been tired moments before, was now a mask of cold, surgical focus. He wasn't thinking about the two masked men rushing through the broken window. He was thinking only about getting the girl out. Vito, diversion. Now, Leonardo commanded, his voice barely audible over the growing shouts. Vito, who was always ready for this kind of chaos, didn't hesitate. He pulled a chair and slammed it into an empty table near the shattered window, drawing the attacker's attention with the noise. Leonardo used that split-second distraction. He shoved Cecilia down the narrow passage behind the bar. Keep running. Don't look back, he barked at her, releasing her wrist only when she was scrambling toward the back kitchen door. He waited just long enough to see her thin black shirt disappear through the kitchen. Only then did he turn, moving with swift, brutal efficiency to handle the men who had been sent to kill him. It wasn't a fight, it was a cleanup. In less than 30 seconds, Vito had neutralized one attacker, and Leonardo, moving like a dark shadow, disabled the other with a silent, sharp strike that made the man collapse. The whole thing was over before the few remaining customers even finished screaming. Vito was already pulling Leonardo toward the broken window. The car is here, boss. We have to move. They will send more. Leonardo took one last, long look toward the back kitchen door. He had a sudden, overwhelming urge to go back and check on the girl. It was completely irrational, a feeling he hadn't had since he was a child. He pushed the feeling away. He couldn't risk it. Find her, Leonardo ordered, his eyes locked on Vito's. Find the girl. The student. Cecilia. Now. I need to know everything about her. Where she lives. Who her family is. Everything. Vito, still breathing hard, stared at him. But boss, we have a crisis. Someone inside betrayed you. We need to secure the safe houses, track the movement of. I said everything, Leonardo repeated, his voice dangerously low. And Vito, if anyone else gets their hands on this information, or on her, I will hold you personally responsible. That was all Vito needed to hear. He nodded once, sharply, and followed Leonardo out into the freezing Florence night. 2 hours later, Leonardo wasn't in any of his usual secure headquarters. He was alone in a small, high-walled villa outside the main city, built into a hill overlooking the lights of Tuscany. It was austere and cold, just like him. He was sitting at a massive, dark wooden desk, staring at a small digital folder on a secure laptop. The files hadn't come from Vito, they had come from Rocco, the man Leonardo trusted above all others for information. Rocco was silent, pale-skinned, and meticulous, a former university student who knew how to find out a person's whole life without ever leaving his chair. Leonardo hated needing anyone. He especially hated this feeling of confusion she had stirred up. He didn't do irrational acts. He was the head of a huge, complicated enterprise. Every move he made was usually calculated 2 steps ahead. But asking Cecilia to sit with him, ordering his men to risk their lives to protect her, that wasn't calculation. It felt like destiny. He opened the file labeled Cecilia Alvarez, Preliminary Report. The details were exactly what he expected for a girl working at that bar. Nationality, American. Family status, orphaned when she was very young. Education, literature student at the University of Florence. Working part-time to afford rent and food. Residence, a tiny, run-down apartment in the older, less fashionable part of the city. History, clean. No criminal records. No ties to organized crime. No rich boyfriends. No major debts. She was exactly what she seemed, innocent and desperately poor. She was perfect. An easy mark for anyone, which made Leonardo even more anxious. He scrolled down, trying to pinpoint why she looked so familiar, why her face haunted his memory like a song he couldn't name. Then he reached the section on her childhood. Name, Cecilia Alvarez. Original birthplace, a small, unremarkable town on the coast of Massachusetts, USA. Father, Rafael Alvarez, deceased. Mother, Sofia, deceased. Leonardo's hand, which had been resting casually on the desk, suddenly gripped the wood so hard his knuckles turned white. He didn't drop things. He didn't shake. But now, a slow, deep tremor started in his chest. The woman she reminded him of, the secret loss that had defined his entire adult life, was his younger sister, Isabella. Isabella had also been quiet, soulful, and completely focused on art and literature, not the dark world of their family. And Isabella had been murdered 7 years ago in a botched attack that was meant for him. He had spent years trying to erase the pain, trying to find her killer. Now, he looked at Cecilia's file again. It wasn't the town or the parents' names that got him. It was a single, tiny detail that Rocco had added, thinking it was just a strange quirk of history. Note, Cecilia's mother, Sofia, was confirmed to have lived in Naples, Italy, during the years 1998 to 2000, before moving to the US. Her records show she worked briefly as a family assistant and cook for a powerful, unnamed family. The dates slammed into Leonardo like a fist. 1998 to 2000. That was the exact time his own family had moved their main operations from Naples to Florence to solidify their power. And Sofia, Cecilia's mother, had been a family assistant and cook for a powerful, unnamed family during that time. His slate-gray eyes were wide with a shock that rarely touched him. He reached into a safe hidden behind a bookshelf, pulling out a faded, ancient photograph of his family's compound in Naples. He zoomed in on the file photo of Cecilia's mother, Sofia, then looked at the blurry background of his old family photo. There, standing next to the old stone wall, dressed in a white apron, was a young woman who looked exactly like the woman in the file. Sofia. If Sofia worked for his family back then, it meant that Cecilia's past, this quiet girl he had randomly chosen in a bar because of her sad eyes, was intertwined with his history. It meant she wasn't just a coincidence. The terrifying realization hit him. The girl was not just a reminder of his lost sister. She might be a hidden piece of the past that was now being used against him. Leonardo lifted his head, his eyes burning with cold determination. He had to keep her safe, not just because he felt drawn to her, but because she might be the only key to understanding the betrayal that was currently tearing his world apart. Rocco, he spoke into his secure phone, his voice tight. Find her. Move her. Now. Bring her somewhere safe. Tell no one. Not even Vito. She is a shield now. Cecilia sat in her tiny kitchen, clutching a chipped mug of herbal tea, but she couldn't stop her hands from shaking. The tea was cold now, and the small apartment was silent, but the silence felt loud and dangerous. It had been 2 days since the glass exploded in the bar. 2 days since the handsome, terrifying man named Leonardo had ordered her to sit with him, only to then use his body as a shield when men rushed in to attack him. She hadn't gone back to work. Marco, her manager, had called her once, telling her not to worry about the smashed window, but also asking nervously when she would return. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the broken glass, the masked faces, and the sheer, cold intensity in Leonardo's eyes. Cecilia was a woman of routine, and fear was messing up her routine. She needed groceries, and she definitely needed to check her university library account. She needed to feel normal again. She pulled on a thick, hand-knitted navy sweater and her only pair of slightly worn boots. She paused by the door, trying to force herself to breathe slowly. Her skin was a beautiful caramel color, but right now, under the harsh light of the ceiling lamp, she looked pale with worry. As she stepped out onto the narrow, cobblestone street, she felt it immediately, eyes on her. It wasn't the kind of feeling you get from a casual passerby. This was heavy, fixed, and patient, like a hawk waiting on a wire. She hurried to the panetteria, the local bakery, keeping her head down. She bought a simple loaf of bread and a few apples, trying to act like a typical, distracted student. When she stepped back outside, she dared a quick, discreet glance up and down the street. That was when she saw him. He was leaning against the stone wall across the street, near a row of Vespers. He was a black man, maybe in his late 30s, dressed in an unremarkable grey jacket and faded jeans. He was handsome in a common, everyday way, with a close-cropped beard and a kind of nervous energy about him. He wasn't dressed like Vito, Leonardo's bodyguard, who looked like a walking bank vault. This man looked like an ordinary, slightly stressed worker taking a coffee break. But he wasn't looking at his phone, or the sky, or the other people. He was looking only at her. When he realized she had noticed him, he didn't look away smoothly like a professional. Instead, he snapped his head down, suddenly pretending to tie his shoelace, even though he was wearing slip-on boots. It was too clumsy, too obvious. Cecilia's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't Leonardo's security. If Leonardo wanted her watched, she knew, deep down, she would never see the watcher. This felt personal, almost amateur, and that made it even more terrifying. She spun around and walked quickly toward the public square. She ducked into a small, crowded cafe, ordered an espresso, and took a seat near the back window where she could see the street. 5 minutes later, the grey jacket appeared. The man walked past the cafe window, slowly, then stopped a few doors down and pretended to study a poster for a classical music concert. He wasn't even looking at the poster, he was looking at the reflection in the glass, trying to catch her eyes. Who is he? Cecilia thought, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She had never seen him before. No one from her university or her old job. He didn't look like an investigator. He looked like someone looking for a connection. The thought struck her, what if this was somehow connected to her mother? Her mother, Sophia, had died when Cecilia was 10, taking all her secrets about her life in Italy with her. Cecilia had no family left, no one to ask. She quickly finished her espresso and stood up, deciding to test him. Instead of walking toward her home, she walked in the opposite direction, toward the massive, open doors of a famous cathedral. She knew the tourist crowds inside would be thick, giving her a chance to lose him. She pushed her way through the heavy velvet ropes, stepping into the massive, echoing space. The cool, damp air smelled of ancient stone and faint incense. She walked faster, weaving between groups of snapping tourists, her eyes scanning the crowds. She glanced back. He was there. The man in the grey jacket, moving through the cathedral crowd with a tense, driven stride, clearly trying to keep her in sight without running. This was no longer just surveillance. This was hunting. Cecilia spotted a side exit, a small, dark wooden door usually used by the priests. She took a sharp left, pushing the door open, and tumbled out into a narrow, dark alleyway. She started running, her boots scraping on the wet cobblestones. She ran until she couldn't hear her own thoughts anymore, finally collapsing against a brick wall in a quiet, trash-filled courtyard, gasping for air. She pulled out her cheap phone. No messages. No missed calls. She was completely alone. Just as the relief started to settle in, a small, laminated card slid under the iron gate of the courtyard. It was bright white against the dirty stone. Cecilia walked over, her legs shaking, and slowly picked it up. It wasn't a business card. It was a photograph. A very old, grainy picture of two young girls sitting side by side on a stone bench in a sunny garden. One of the girls was clearly Cecilia's mother, Sophia, but younger, with a brilliant, happy smile. And the second girl had the exact same sad, soulful brown eyes that Cecilia saw every morning in her own mirror. She looked exactly like Cecilia, but she wasn't. Printed on the back of the photo, in sharp black ink, was a single, chilling message. Isabella wasn't ready then. Are you ready now, daughter? The message was signed with a single, crudely drawn symbol that looked like a bird's talon gripping a heart. Cecilia stumbled backward, dropping the photo. Isabella? That was the name Leonardo had mentioned earlier, his lost sister. And what did the word daughter mean? Was this man saying he was her father? Just as she was frozen in pure, cold terror, a quiet, metallic sound echoed from the top of the courtyard wall. She looked up. There was a man there, staring down at her. Not the man in the grey jacket. This one was Silas, Leonardo's meticulous assistant, Rocco's right hand. He was lean, dark-haired, and wearing an expensive, tailored suit, and he moved with the silence of a cat. Cecilia Alvarez, Silas said, his voice flat and controlled. You need to come with me. Now. The boss has been watching your life. He didn't wait for her to answer. He dropped down from the wall, landing silently, and strode toward her, his face showing no emotion but pure, urgent command. She was no longer safe, and the two dangerous paths of her life, Leonardo's world and her forgotten past, had just violently collided. Silas moved with a kind of dark grace that was scarier than Vito's brute force. He didn't rush Cecilia, but his presence left no room for arguments or delays. He took the photo from her trembling hand, glanced at the ancient image of her mother and the girl named Isabella, and tucked it into his jacket without a word. Who was that man? Cecilia asked, stumbling as Silas guided her quickly down the alleyway to a waiting, unmarked black car. The man in the grey jacket? Is he part of your world? Silas, lean and efficient in his expensive suit, opened the car door. His face was a study in cold control. That man is irrelevant now, he said, his voice clipped. He was sloppy. He was emotional. He was not one of ours. Get in. Cecilia was too drained to fight. She slid into the leather seat. As they sped through the tight streets of Florence, she kept glancing at Silas, trying to find a crack in his armor. Who is Isabella? She whispered, clutching her hands in her lap. Silas gave her a rare, brief glance in the rearview mirror. That is information for the boss to share. Not me. That was the end of the conversation. It was clear that in Leonardo's world, people followed orders and kept secrets, even if those secrets involved a photo left by a mysterious stalker who knew too much about her dead mother. They arrived at a sprawling, modern compound tucked into the hills. It was all steel and massive windows, protected by high fences and hidden cameras. It felt less like a home and more like a fortress. She was led into a huge, minimalist living area where Leonardo Valtieri stood, his back to a massive window, staring out at the darkening city lights. He hadn't changed clothes since the bar attack. He looked tired, yes, but mostly he looked like a general who had just discovered his own map room had been bugged. He was waiting for her. His eyes, those intense, slate-gray eyes, immediately found hers, and the confusion and sadness she saw the night before were gone. Now, they were burning with sharp, professional concentration. Silas tells me you were being watched by someone outside the structure, Leonardo said, skipping any greeting. He spoke in rapid Italian, then switched to English for her benefit. Did he threaten you? Did he speak to you? He left this, Cecilia said, pointing to the photo Silas still held. He wrote a message. He asked if I was ready, because Isabella wasn't. And he called me, daughter. Leonardo's jaw tightened. He held out his hand to Silas, who immediately passed him the photo. Leonardo stared at the two young women smiling in the sun. He recognized his dead sister, Isabella, instantly. And he recognized Sophia, Cecilia's mother, who had been a cook in their Naples house decades ago. "This changes everything," Leonardo murmured, more to himself than to her. He paced the room twice, then stopped abruptly, turning to Silas. "The phone call. Did we trace it?" "We traced it, boss," Silas reported. "It came from an old, encrypted line we haven't used in years. It's inside the Valtieri family estate. Specifically, the library wing. And only 2 people have clearance to the library wing right now." Leonardo didn't need to hear the names. He already knew. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Marco," Leonardo hissed, his voice heavy with disbelief and rage. Marco Valtieri wasn't just a cousin or a random advisor. He was Leonardo's uncle, his father's older brother, who had always served as the family's main planner. He was a man with a white, neatly trimmed beard and a constant, disappointed frown. He dressed in expensive, slightly old-fashioned suits and carried himself with the weight of tradition. Marco felt Leonardo was too young, too modern, and too Americanized to lead the family's old-world business. The betrayal was not a simple theft. It was a hostile takeover. Just then, a secure video line chimed on the massive television screen against the wall. Leonardo walked over and accepted the call without hesitation. On the screen appeared the stern, disapproving face of Uncle Marco. "Leonardo," Marco said, his voice calm, polite, and dripping with controlled malice. "I see you have a guest. An unexpected one, perhaps." He nodded toward Cecilia, who was shrinking slightly into the couch. "What do you want, Marco?" Leonardo asked, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You sent 2 street thugs to my bar. Now you're tracking a civilian student. What is the end goal?" Marco smiled, a cold, dry expression that didn't reach his eyes. "The end goal, nephew, is stability. You have become too reckless. The younger generation has forgotten the rules. And the family needs leadership that respects its history." He paused, then his eyes locked directly onto Cecilia on the screen. "I have taken the liberty of pulling the old personnel files from the Naples house, Leonardo. Do you remember Sophia? The beautiful cook? The one who disappeared after a little incident in 2000. Leonardo felt a spike of pure adrenaline. "Leave her out of this. That was decades ago." "Decades ago, yes. But secrets have long shelf lives," Marco countered smoothly. "The girl, Cecilia, is an interesting key. Her mother, Sophia, worked for us. And her father, well, her father was part of a mistake your own father tried desperately to cover up." Marco leaned into the screen, his tone dropping into a hard threat. "The family cannot have a scandal involving a girl with ties to our most embarrassing failure sitting at your side. It makes us look weak. It destroys our reputation with the old guard." He then laid out his plan, using cold, simple words. "You have 2 hours, Leonardo. Step down as the head of the family, name me the temporary leader, and the records of Cecilia's family history will stay buried, where they belong. We forget this entire unfortunate evening." Marco paused for dramatic effect, his eyes twinkling dangerously. "If you refuse, the full story of Sophia's involvement and Cecilia's true paternity will be leaked to the Italian police, to the rival organizations, and to every newspaper in Florence. That kind of scandal will remove you permanently, Leonardo. And it will destroy the girl's life." Leonardo looked from the face of his betraying uncle on the screen to the terrified, confused face of Cecilia in his living room. His world had been reduced to a simple, brutal choice: his power, or her peace. He took a deep, steadying breath, his cold heart finally melting into fierce determination. He had lost Isabella because of this family. He wouldn't lose Cecilia, no matter the cost. "You won't win this, Marco," Leonardo vowed, his voice low and shaking with controlled fury. "You just chose the wrong person to use as leverage." Leonardo knew he couldn't let Marco win. Stepping down meant his uncle would destroy Cecilia anyway, just to cover up the family secrets. He had lost one person he loved to this life, he wouldn't lose another, even if he barely knew her. He hung up the video call with Uncle Marco, the rage inside him a cold, heavy stone. "Silas," he commanded, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "The 2 hours are a bluff. Marco will move now. Get every file we have on the Naples house, 1998 to 2000. Find the name of the man Sophia worked for. Find everything about Isabella's life and death. We need the truth before Marco uses the lies. Silas moved instantly toward the secure data station. Vito, who had been standing silent guard near the door, stepped forward. Boss, what about the girl? He glanced at Cecilia, who was sitting on the couch, small and trembling. She stays here. Secured, Leonardo said. She is the key to all this. If Marco gets her, he wins. And if that stalker finds her again, she's dead. Cecilia finally found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. I can't just sit here. I feel like a cage, and I still don't know why I look like your sister, or why my mother's past is suddenly the biggest danger in Italy. Leonardo looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, his face softened. He knew her fear was real. He walked toward her, resting his large hands on the back of the couch, close but not touching. This is my war, Cecilia, not yours. But you are caught in the crossfire now, he said, his voice quiet. All you need to know is this. Your mother worked for my family in Naples. My sister, Isabella, was murdered 7 years ago. You look so much like her that I stopped breathing when I saw you. Marco is using that connection to force me out. Your safety is the one thing he knows I cannot ignore. Before Cecilia could process this heavy, brutal honesty, the alarm system in the house suddenly blared, not the perimeter alarm, but the communications alarm. Silas's head snapped up from his computer screen. Boss. It's not the police. It's an information leak. Marco moved already. The video hit the internet like a wildfire. It was a short, shaky clip, maybe 10 seconds long, taken by one of Marco's hidden cameras inside the bar before the attack. Marco hadn't used the old family secrets yet. He had gone for public humiliation first. Silas pulled up the video on the screen. Cecilia, Leonardo, and Vito gathered around the screen, watching the replay in horrified silence. The clip started with a close-up of Leonardo's face, looking intense and focused on Cecilia. The editing was designed to tell a cruel story. It showed Cecilia, the poor, young, foreign student in her cheap black uniform, sitting pressed close against Leonardo, the most powerful man in the city. Then, right as Leonardo reached out and forcefully pulled her down onto the seat, which in reality was the moment the glass shattered and he was protecting her, the video cut out with a slow-motion shot of their faces pressed close together, looking intimate and secretive. The accompanying headline, plastered all over the most gossipy, unreliable European news sites, screamed, Valtieri boss distracted by maid. Caught hiding new, scandalous lover moments before attack. It's being shared on every platform, Silas reported, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The comments are terrible. Everyone is calling her the boss's distraction, his dirty secret. They're saying you're losing focus, Leonardo. Cecilia felt a deep, burning humiliation rise from her stomach to her cheeks. She wasn't just a part of the crime, she was now the scandal. Her innocent attempt to survive was twisted into a tawdry, cheap affair. But they don't show the broken glass. They don't show the attack. Cecilia cried out, pointing at the screen. They make it look like I'm his mistress. Vito scowled. That's the point, Signorina. Marco doesn't want people to think the boss is strong enough to fight. He wants them to think the boss is weak, careless, and breaking the ancient rules for a common girl. Leonardo watched the video loop, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. This was the genius of Marco's cruelty. He hadn't attacked Leonardo's business. He had attacked his honor and his reputation among the traditional family council members. If Leonardo was seen as publicly distracted by a scandalous relationship with a lowborn girl when he should have been focused on security, the council would have every reason to ask him to step aside. The humiliation Cecilia felt was now compounded by the sheer powerlessness of it all. Her face, her innocent fear, was now a public joke. Leonardo suddenly hit the power button on the screen, plunging the room into darkness. Enough, he said, his voice raw with a dangerous calm. He turned back to Cecilia, his eyes reflecting the few city lights outside. He chose to make this public. He chose to make you a pawn. He took a step toward her, his mind clearly made up, the weight of his entire organization heavy on his shoulders. We fight fire with fire. We don't run, and we don't hide you anymore, Leonardo declared, his voice rising with chilling resolve. Marco wanted a scandal. I will give him something much bigger. Something he cannot spin. He looked straight into Cecilia's stunned brown eyes. Cecilia, you are not a mistress. You are not a secret. But to survive this, and to defeat Marco and the shame he is trying to put on you, we must change the story, completely. He gave her the most serious, binding look she had ever received. From this moment forward, you are no longer the maid he caught hiding. You are the woman I chose. We have to make a very public statement. It is the only way to protect both of us. He paused, letting the final, shocking words sink in. We are getting married, Cecilia. You are going to be my wife. Cecilia stared at Leonardo, unable to process the words. We are getting married. The thought of it, the legal, final commitment to a man she barely knew, a man whose life was violence and shadows, made her head spin more than the thought of the viral video. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, you can't just decide that. You can't command me to become your wife just to fix your business problem. Leonardo sighed, the weariness showing again in his dark, intense eyes. It is not just my problem anymore, Cecilia. Marco made sure of that. The scandal will ruin you, and the stalker who left you that photo is still out there. If you walk out of this compound, you are exposed to two very dangerous worlds. This is the only way to put an impenetrable wall around you. Then give me the wall of truth first, Cecilia demanded, the fear giving way to a sudden, brittle courage. Who was Isabella? Why did that man call me daughter? And what is the scandal my mother was supposedly involved in? Leonardo looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. He knew he owed her the answers. Silas, he called out, standing tall and dominant in the vast room. Show her the details. Tell her what we found. Silas, ever quiet and efficient, pulled up a screen showing old, faded documents and photos. Your mother, Sofia Alvarez, Silas began, pointing to a beautiful, smiling woman in an old photo. She didn't just cook in the Naples house. She was what we call a confidant, a deeply trusted helper to Leonardo's mother. She saw everything. She heard everything. Cecilia leaned closer, a lump forming in her throat as she saw her mother's youthful face. Leonardo's sister, Isabella, was younger then, Silas continued. She hated this life. She hated the business, the violence, the closed world. She looked to your mother, Sofia, because Sofia was proof that you could leave the family and start a normal life in the US. Isabella wanted out, badly. Leonardo took over the narration, his voice dropping to a painful, personal level. Isabella wasn't killed by an outside enemy, he said bitterly. She was killed by an internal order. Someone inside the family, someone close, didn't want her to leave. They feared her leaving would expose a major secret, a bad choice the family had made in the past. They pretended it was an accident. It destroyed my father, and it destroyed me. Cecilia felt a shiver run down her spine. The two girls in the photo, her mother and Leonardo's sister, were conspiring to escape the darkness, and one of them had paid the ultimate price. And the stalker? Cecilia asked, her voice barely audible. We believe the stalker is connected to the secret Isabella was trying to protect, Leonardo explained. Marco is hinting that your father, the man who left you that photo, was involved in that very secret. That's the scandal, that the current boss, me, would protect a girl whose own father was mixed up in a betrayal of the Valtieri family. Silas then brought up a highly simplified family tree chart, pointing to a man's name that was listed as having worked in the Naples docks during the same time as Sofia. The most likely candidate for your biological father, based on these old records and Marco's threats, is Dario Rossi, Silas stated. He was a middleman, a connection to a powerful rival European gang back then. A bad choice, an embarrassing enemy. Leonardo finished the terrible explanation. The photo the stalker left you, the one calling you daughter? That was a message from Dario, or someone working for him. Isabella wasn't ready then, she wasn't ready to face the consequences of leaving. The stalker is warning you that if you try to live a quiet life now, just like Isabella tried, the family, or its enemies, will silence you, too. Cecilia felt the floor crumble beneath her. Her whole life had been a lie built on silence and distance. She wasn't just a random American student. She was the hidden link between Leonardo's greatest loss, Isabella, and his greatest enemy, Marco, and the secrets of the past. Her very existence was the embodiment of the family's most embarrassing scandal. Tears welled in her soulful brown eyes. So the man who left me that photo, he might be my father? And he's threatening me to save me from the people who killed your sister. The lines are blurred, Cecilia, Leonardo said, his intense gaze never leaving her. Your father, or whoever sent that, is likely using you to pressure me, but he is also warning you. That bird's talon symbol he drew on the back of the photo, that belongs to that old rival gang Dario worked for. They want to expose our vulnerability. And right now, you are our biggest vulnerability. He walked toward her, slowly, and knelt down so they were eye to eye. He didn't touch her, respecting her space, but his emotion was raw and visible. Marco will destroy your reputation and then let the rivals or the stalker handle the rest. I can only stop him by making you untouchable. I have to put the Valtieri family name on you, Cecilia. It's a prison, yes, but it's the only fortress strong enough to keep out both Marco's lies and the threat from your past. Cecilia looked at the screen, at the blurred photo of her mother and the doomed sister, Isabella, who looked so much like her. She realized she had inherited more than her mother's eyes. She had inherited her mother's danger. She had to fight, not just for herself, but to honor the secret her mother died trying to protect. She lifted her chin, wiping the tears away. The fear was still there, but it was mixed now with a cold, necessary resolve. If I do this, Cecilia said, her voice surprisingly steady, if I marry you to become your shield, I do it under one condition. The moment this is over, the moment Marco is defeated, you let me walk away. Free and completely safe. Do you promise me that, Leonardo? Leonardo looked at the beautiful, determined young woman in front of him, the one who carried the shadow of his sister, and he felt a sharp, unexpected pang of something that felt less like strategy and more like respect. I give you my word, Cecilia, Leonardo vowed solemnly. When the war is done, you walk away free. We get married tomorrow. Cecilia had spent her entire adult life trying to look invisible. Simple clothes, quiet manners, and a focus on books and work were her shield. Now, standing in front of a mirror in the vast, secure fortress, she felt tragically visible. She was wearing a simple, yet stunning ivory dress that Silas had brought in. It was modest but tailored perfectly, emphasizing her height and the smooth caramel tone of her skin. Expensive diamonds, simple and elegant, glittered briefly at her ears. She felt like a doll being dressed for a war she didn't understand. It changes the headline, Leonardo said, watching her from across the room. He was wearing an impeccably tailored dark suit. The young, poor student is a scandalous mistress. But the woman dressed like that, standing next to me, she is a future wife. The narrative changes from weakness to power. Cecilia looked at her reflection, seeing the beautiful stranger. It also changes the promise, she said, her voice strained. You promised me freedom. And every expensive thing you put on me just feels like a heavier chain. Leonardo walked toward her, his expression serious. The promise is firm, Cecilia. We survive this. We defeat Marco. And you walk away. This marriage is a contract to protect you, not to own you. She believed him. She had to. His word was all she had left. The plan was simple: host a sudden, small press event at an old, historic Valtieri villa. Leonardo would announce their immediate engagement, claiming they had been quietly involved for months, and that the leaked video was merely a private moment of affection interrupted by a failed assassination attempt. It was a bold lie meant to silence the rumors of his weakness and protect her honor. Vito was coordinating the physical security outside, a massive undertaking. Silas, meanwhile, was in charge of information flow. Just as Leonardo adjusted the collar of his shirt, readying himself to face the world, Silas walked into the room, his face pale and tight. Boss, we have a major complication. External, Silas announced, his voice low and urgent. Leonardo didn't flinch. Marco's rivals. Worse. The Han Group. The name landed in the quiet room like a lead weight. The Han Group was a powerful, modern Korean syndicate operating across Asia and parts of Europe. They weren't like the traditional Italian family. They were cold, technology-focused, and ruthless. Their leader, a formidable woman named Jaewon Han, was known for never forgetting a betrayal. Why now? Leonardo demanded. The Han Group feud has been frozen for 5 years. The viral video, Silas said, pointing to the screen that was still showing the humiliating clip. Marco's attack created a window of opportunity. They see you as vulnerable and distracted by sentiment. They just hit 2 of our cargo points in Rotterdam and Naples simultaneously. They are sending a message: the truce is over. The news instantly raised the stakes from a family squabble to an international war. Get Vito back here, Leonardo ordered, running a hand through his dark hair. We need to rethink the security for the announcement. This changes everything. Cecilia watched them, the fear returning in full force. She was a literature student. She was supposed to be studying poetry, not watching crime bosses discuss global rivalries. The Han group, she whispered, mostly to herself. What do they want? Leonardo looked at her, and the look in his eyes was heavy with reluctance and deep concern. Cecilia, he said, stepping closer. The Han group feud, it's not just about territory and cargo. It's about a betrayal that happened years ago, right around the time Isabella was killed. And that betrayal connects directly to you. Silas took a deep breath, clearly uncomfortable with the revelation he was about to make. The feud started 7 years ago, Silas explained simply. Your father, Dario Rossi, the man we suspect left you that photo, was a middleman. He was setting up a massive, high-risk trade deal between the Valtieri family and the Han group. If that deal had gone through, it would have secured both sides for a generation. Leonardo continued the terrible story. But Dario, your father, betrayed both of us. He stole the assets, disappearing completely, and left both organizations exposed to massive loss. The Han group lost a tremendous amount of money and power. They never forgot it. Cecilia felt dizzy. Her whole past was a tapestry of lies and betrayal, and her mother had kept her hidden in plain sight, fearing this very moment. Wait, Cecilia said, her voice shaking. If my father betrayed them both, why didn't the Han group kill him immediately? They believe he is dead, or too well hidden to find, Silas answered. But the Han group has a powerful, rigid sense of justice. They want revenge, but more than that, they want the stolen assets back. They have been monitoring the movements of everyone connected to that betrayal. Silas then pointed to the latest live intelligence report flickering on the screen. It was a brief, coded message intercepted from the Han group's European communication line. The message was clear, chilling, and focused entirely on her. The daughter of the traitor, the bride of the boss. She is the closest link. We take her. Justice will be served by the daughter's suffering. Cecilia read the words, her eyes widening in absolute horror. The Korean syndicate was not targeting Leonardo's money or territory. They were targeting her, not as leverage against Leonardo, but as direct revenge for her father's sins. They see me as the daughter of the traitor, Cecilia realized, her voice tight with terror. They are coming for me, not for you. Leonardo gripped her shoulders gently, his dark eyes intense. Which means, he said, his voice hard with cold resolve, that this marriage is no longer a political tool against Marco. It is the only thing that can elevate you from revenge target to untouchable family property. We proceed with the public statement immediately. We make you a Valtieri, and no one, not Marco, not the stalker, and certainly not the Han group, will dare to touch my wife. Cecilia felt the weight of the diamonds on her ears, heavy and cold, a stark contrast to the pounding heat in her chest. She stood in the private waiting room of the historic Valtieri villa, a beautiful, centuries-old structure that felt like the heart of the Mafia's traditions. Outside, she could hear the muffled chaos of reporters and the heavy silence of security personnel. She was dressed like a bride, but she felt like a hostage. Leonardo stood opposite her, adjusting his cufflink. His slate-gray eyes were sharp and focused, but they held a layer of intense worry she hadn't seen before. Are you ready? He asked, his voice low. Ready to be your shield? As ready as I can be, Cecilia answered honestly. I just wish I wasn't doing this in the middle of a war involving my dead mother, your dead sister, a terrible uncle, and a Korean gang. Leonardo almost smiled. It was a brief flicker of genuine human warmth. I promise you, Cecilia, this is the safest place for you right now. Making you a Valtieri is the fastest way to make every enemy think twice. We step out, we smile, we announce the wedding, and Marco loses his public advantage. He looked at her, and this time, He let his hand rest briefly on her shoulder. Just for a moment, forget the lies. You have my word. I will get you out of this. Just as Vito's booming voice sounded from the corridor, signaling it was time for them to emerge, the lights in the waiting room suddenly flickered and died. Darkness. Power surge, Vito muttered, frustrated. Don't move, boss. The backup generators are kicking in. In the sudden, heavy silence, a side door, usually bolted shut, burst inward with a sharp, controlled crack. Before Leonardo could even react, a figure in a dark, featureless jumpsuit was on Cecilia. The attack was too quick, too focused, and far too silent to be the clumsy, rage-filled approach of the stalker. It was surgical. Vito yelled out a warning, and Leonardo lunged forward, but it was too late. The figure was already dragging Cecilia backward, a hand clamped over her mouth, pulling her toward the broken side door. The figure didn't fight Leonardo, they simply avoided him, using the furniture and the elegant confusion of the dark room as cover. Cecilia was roughly pulled outside into a small, shadowed courtyard. She felt the chill of the air and the roar of a fast-moving engine. Then, she was shoved into the back of a van. The door slammed shut, and the vehicle took off at blinding speed, leaving behind the frantic shouts of Leonardo and Vito. The kidnapping was smooth, quick, and brutal. Leonardo and his team immediately assumed the worst, the Han Group. The Korean syndicate had explicitly stated their intent to take her for revenge. They had exploited the temporary power outage, a classic move to bypass electronic security. But Cecilia was not taken to a dark, industrial warehouse or a container ship. Instead, after a long, jarring ride, she was pulled out of the van and taken into a quiet, secluded mountain cabin, a small, wooden structure that felt peaceful and isolated. The man who removed the hood from her head was not a silent, foreign agent. He was a familiar face, though one she barely knew, Silas. Cecilia stared at him, bewildered. Silas, Leonardo's cool, hyper-competent assistant. The man who handled all the delicate, hidden information. The man Leonardo trusted with his secrets. Silas? What is this? Cecilia asked, her voice raspy. Are you working for Marco? Did he pay you off to deliver me to the Han Group? Silas stood tall, his dark eyes filled with a strained, desperate urgency that contradicted his usual stillness. He still wore his expensive, tailored suit, now slightly dusty from the ordeal. I am not working for Marco, Silas said, his voice quiet but firm. I am working for the truth. And I am doing this to save your life, Cecilia. Not to end it. He walked over to a small, cast-iron fireplace where a fire was already burning. He looked sad, burdened, and completely resolute. Leonardo's plan is reckless, Silas explained, choosing his words carefully. Parading you in front of the world as his wife is the fastest way to put a target on your back. It didn't save Isabella, and it won't save you. Cecilia felt a terrifying coldness seep into her bones. What are you talking about? How do you know about Isabella? Silas looked down, a wave of profound sorrow crossing his face. I know about Isabella because I was there, he confessed. 7 years ago, I was guarding the secure location where Isabella was trying to hide before she could escape the family forever. I was supposed to be her last guard, working under the instruction of Leonardo's own mother, who wanted her daughter free. He looked up, his eyes glassy with old pain. When the attack came, it was fast. It wasn't an accident, Cecilia. It was precise. And I saw who ordered it, not Marco, not the Han Group, but someone else, someone higher who feared what Isabella knew. I failed her. I carried her body away, and I swore that day I would never let another innocent person tied to this family's shame die on my watch. The true twist was not about money or power. It was about loyalty, failure, and a deeply held conscience. You remind me of her, Cecilia, Silas said, his voice breaking slightly. Just like Leonardo, but more so. You have her spirit. When Leonardo decided to make you public property, I knew I had to choose, loyalty to the boss, or loyalty to the promise I made to the dead. He looked around the secure, quiet cabin. Marco will be looking for you, yes. The Han Group will be hunting the bride they expect to use for leverage. But they will never find you here. I didn't kidnap you for revenge or profit, Cecilia. I kidnapped you to hide you and keep you alive. He had acted alone, driven by a 7-year-old failure and the desperate need to save the living echo of the girl he had lost. Cecilia was utterly confused. Her life was now tied to a man who promised her freedom but made her a target, and a man who had kidnapped her but was offering her safety in a quiet cabin. She was hidden, but she was now caught between two desperate, powerful protectors, both claiming to know the only path to save her. Leonardo Valtieri was not a man built for patience or failure. The moment he realized Cecilia was gone, snatched from under his nose, the disciplined control he usually held over himself shattered into a million pieces. He didn't waste time calling the police or holding calm strategy sessions. He went straight to war. Vito, who had served the Valtieri family for decades, had never seen his boss like this. Leonardo was acting on pure, desperate emotion. Seal every road in a 40-mile radius. Leonardo roared into the secure radio link, his voice raw with fury as he sped through the back streets of Florence in an armored car, ignoring every traffic law. I don't care if you have to block the main highway. Bring in every man. I want every single member of the Han group found. Every apartment, every warehouse, every safe house, hit them. Now. Vito was driving, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Boss, this is too fast. We'll start a war we can't control. The police will be everywhere, and Marco will use this public chaos to take over the council. Marco is irrelevant. Leonardo snarled, throwing his heavy phone across the car in a rare display of lost control. The Han group took her. They want revenge for her father, Dario Rossi. They want to use her suffering to pay for his sins. I told her I would protect her. I failed. For the next few hours, Florence was plunged into chaos. Roadblocks appeared from nowhere. Buildings known to house Han group operations were violently raided. Leonardo was dismantling half the city, not for profit, but out of a blind, terrifying need to find the woman who represented his last chance at redemption. He was proving Marco's point. He was losing control because of a girl. Meanwhile, in the quiet solitude of the mountain cabin, Cecilia was wrapped in a thick blanket, sipping tea, trying to reconcile the cold-blooded kidnapper with the desperate, sorrowful man sitting across from her. You keep saying Leonardo's plan would have killed me, Cecilia pressed, setting down her mug. Why? He promised me freedom. He promised he'd keep me safe from Marco and the Han group. Silas rubbed his temples, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. He knew what he was about to say would destroy Leonardo, and might destroy Cecilia's trust in him completely. Leonardo is blinded by two things, his guilt over Isabella, and his loyalty to the family name, Silas began, his voice barely above a whisper. He believes the threat comes from the outside, or from Marco. He is wrong. The biggest threat is still standing inside the Valtieri walls. He looked directly into Cecilia's soulful brown eyes. Cecilia, I lied to you. When I told you Isabella was killed by someone high up because she knew a secret. That was true. But the secret was far worse than a rival gang or a bad deal. Silas leaned forward, his confession heavy with 7 years of grief and silence. Isabella found undeniable evidence, old bank records and signed documents, that Leonardo's own father, the previous boss, was involved in the murder of several innocent officials to secure his rise to power decades ago. It was a massive, unforgivable crime hidden deep in the family's history. Cecilia gasped, the blanket falling away from her shoulders. The boss? Leonardo's father. Yes. Isabella was running to the police with the evidence to expose her own father and save the family from its terrible foundation. Silas continued, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia, your mother, was helping her hide the evidence. Your mother was the only person Isabella trusted. Then came the terrible, store-flipping secret. The person who ordered the hit on Isabella was Leonardo's mother, Silas confessed, tears finally glazing his eyes. She found out Isabella was going to expose the shame, and she had her own daughter silenced to protect her husband's legacy and the family name. I was there. I witnessed it. She is the one Marco is truly terrified of, the one who controls the old loyalists. Cecilia felt a wave of nausea. The person Leonardo trusted most, the elegant matriarch of the family, was a cold-blooded murderer who had killed her own daughter. So Marco's threats about my father, Dario Rossi, and the Korean group, that was all a distraction? Cecilia asked, her voice shaking. Yes. Dario Rossi didn't steal the assets to profit. He stole them to create leverage against the entire Valtieri family because he, too, knew about the truth and wanted to force them to stop the violence. He was trying to expose the same corruption Isabella was. Silas exclaimed. Marco is using the embarrassing truth about your father to cover up the devastating truth about Leonardo's mother. Silas pointed toward the fire. Leonardo's marriage plan is a trap. If he brings you into the heart of the family as his wife, his mother will see you as the last connection to Isabella and the evidence. She will kill you to protect the secret, just like she killed Isabella. The realization hit Cecilia with crushing finality. She wasn't just facing an uncle or a rival gang, she was facing a powerful, invisible killer who was protected by her own son's loyalty and love. Where is the evidence? Cecilia demanded, her mind racing past the shock and focusing on survival. The documents Isabella had. Where did your mother hide them? Silas shook his head, looking hopeless. We never found them. We think Sofia took them when she fled. She was protecting you, Cecilia, by keeping the biggest secret of the Valtieri family safe with her. Cecilia stood up, her body now tense with a dangerous resolution. Leonardo was destroying the city, believing the wrong enemy had taken her. He was risking everything for her, unaware that the killer was the one woman he would never suspect. I have to go back, Cecilia said, walking toward the cabin door. Silas jumped up, blocking her path. Are you crazy? I risked everything to keep you out of her reach. And I respect that, Silas, Cecilia said, her sad brown eyes now glittering with fierce determination. But Leonardo is in a blind rage fighting the wrong war. He is going to get himself killed, and I will be next. I have to tell him the truth about his mother. And if my own mother was protecting Isabella, maybe I am the key to finding the evidence that Isabella died for. She walked past Silas, pushing the cabin door open and stepping out into the cold mountain air. She was no longer running from the Mafia, she was running straight into its heart, armed with a devastating truth that could either save Leonardo or destroy him completely. Cecilia arrived back at the Valtieri fortress like a ghost, slipping through a gap in the security perimeter that Silas had shown her. She burst into the main living area, where the air was thick with the scent of old smoke and raw desperation. Leonardo Valtieri was standing over a massive holographic map of the city, which was covered in flashing red markers indicating his panicked search efforts. He was disheveled, his suit rumpled, his hair messy, and his slate-gray eyes bloodshot with exhaustion and fury. He looked like a man on the brink of collapse. Vito was nearby, trying to calm a dozen frantic men shouting updates into their radios. The moment Leonardo saw her standing there, safe, alive, but obviously terrified, his whole body went rigid. His rage vanished, replaced by pure, blinding relief. Cecilia, he roared, rushing toward her and gripping her shoulders tightly. Where were you? The Han group? Did they hurt you? And Silas, he betrayed me. He took you. He didn't betray you, Leonardo, he saved me. Cecilia said quickly, pulling away from his grasp and forcing him to look her in the eyes. Silas is loyal to the truth, not the lies your mother built. You have to stop looking for Marco and the Han group. The killer is in your own house. Leonardo recoiled as if she'd slapped him. My house? What foolishness is this? The man who took you is a traitor. Silas was there when Isabella died. Cecilia cried, her voice rising to cut through the frantic energy of the room. He saw the order given. Your sister, Isabella, was killed because she found proof that your father, the boss, was a murderer. And your mother ordered the hit to protect his name. The room went silent. The men stopped shouting into their radios. Vito froze mid-sentence. Leonardo's face went white. The color drained from his skin, leaving him looking like marble. You lie, he whispered, the words shaking with cold denial. My mother, she loved Isabella. She was devastated. This is Silas's last attempt to save his own skin after a massive betrayal. It's the truth, Leonardo. Your mother killed your sister. Cecilia pressed, running to the data station Silas had left running. She pulled up the old personnel file and pointed to the single line of detail on her mother, Sofia. Sofia, my mother, was helping Isabella escape with the evidence. She took the proof when she ran, and she hid me for 20 years. She was protecting your family's secret to save my life. Just then, a small chime sounded on the secure computer. Silas had sent one final, encrypted message. Vito, shaking slightly, walked over and read the screen. "Boss," Vito muttered, his voice hoarse. "It's a location. A small, unused safe deposit box in a bank in Rome. Silas says he found the note from Isabella to Sofia right before she died." Leonardo, his whole world collapsing, moved like a sleepwalker toward the computer screen. The image that flashed up wasn't just a note. It was a single, faded photograph tucked inside an old ledger. The photo showed Leonardo's father, the previous boss, sitting at a table in the Naples villa in 1999. He wasn't alone. Sitting next to him, laughing openly and casually, was Cecilia's mother, Sofia. The casual intimacy in the picture was undeniable. They weren't boss and cook. They were deeply involved. Vito pointed to the back of the ledger, which was a short summary note written by Sofia before she fled. "He is the true danger. I am fleeing to protect our daughter." Leonardo stared at the image, then at the note, then at Cecilia. The rage was gone, replaced by a devastating, profound horror that went deeper than betrayal. "Sofia," Leonardo whispered, realizing the depth of the deception. "She was protecting her secret affair with my father, the great boss. That's why she fled. She had to hide her daughter." Then, the final, impossible realization hit him like a physical blow, connecting all the pieces: the shared sad eyes, the irrational attraction, the overwhelming need to protect her. Leonardo lifted his head and stared at Cecilia, the terrifying truth settling into his slate-gray eyes. "The likeness," he choked out, his voice a ragged whisper. "The reason you look so much like Isabella. The reason I was drawn to you the second I saw you." He stepped back, his entire body trembling as he absorbed the shocking, final revelation. "Cecilia," Leonardo said, the name tasting like ash. "You are not just the daughter of Dario Rossi, the traitor. You are the daughter of my father's forbidden affair. You are my half-sister." The family's shame was not about an affair or a stolen asset. It was about incest and murder. Cecilia, already shattered by the knowledge of her mother and Isabella, now faced the ultimate, heartbreaking truth about the man she was about to marry for protection. The choice was no longer about power politics, it was about the fundamental laws of blood and honor. Marco knew the secret of Isabella's murder, and he knew that Cecilia represented the greatest scandal of all, the truth of the bloodline. He didn't want the throne, he wanted the destruction of Leonardo and the old boss's legacy. Leonardo now held all the cards: the proof that his own mother was the killer, the knowledge of his half-sister's identity, and the freedom of the woman he loved. He was the boss, and the family was awaiting his command. He had to choose. Bloodline and throne: marry Cecilia to keep her safe, inherit the power, and live with the dark, forbidden secret of their shared blood, forever bound to the family's darkness. Heart and freedom: sacrifice the throne, publicly reject the family, and use the evidence to destroy his mother's legacy, ensuring Cecilia's complete, final, and permanent freedom from the Valtieri name. Leonardo looked at the terrified, exhausted girl who was the living, breathing ghost of his lost sister and the symbol of his father's final mistake. He looked at the chaos he had created outside, the innocent people caught in his war. He reached out and gently brushed a strand of dark hair from Cecilia's cheek. His decision was quiet, final, and absolute. "We are not getting married," Leonardo said, his voice firm, choosing his heart over his inherited chaos. "You deserve light, Cecilia. Not this darkness. I cannot be your husband, and I cannot be your brother in this life." He looked at Vito, who was weeping silently at the devastation. "Vito," Leonardo commanded, his eyes filled with sudden, immense strength. "Find Silas. Apologize to him. Then, release the information. All of it. The original murder, the betrayal, and the proof of Marco's involvement. Let the world know the truth. I am stepping down. The throne is empty." He turned back to Cecilia, his gaze locking fiercely onto hers. "I am breaking my oath to my bloodline and the throne to keep my oath to your heart. You are no longer Cecilia Alvarez, the student, or the boss's prospective wife. You are a free woman. Get out of this city, and never look back." Leonardo Valtieri, the ruthless heir, had just sacrificed his entire empire and his family name to save the woman he loved, ensuring she would carry no more of his darkness.